Welcome to True Radar. Before we begin tonight's journey, take a moment to look at the shadows stretching across your room. Let your eyes adjust to the dark. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the mattress beneath you. Take a slow, deep breath in and let the heavy air out. Leave the noise of the day at the door. You are safe here. The door is locked. The night is quiet. All you need to do is listen to the sound of my voice. Tonight, we are traveling back to a cool, quiet evening in the winter of 1994. We are stepping into a place designed for safety, for science, and for saving lives. But sometimes, science fractures. Sometimes, the rules of human biology break down in ways we cannot immediately explain, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions in a sterile, fluorescent-lit room. Close your eyes. Let the rhythm of the rain wash over you. And let me tell you the bizarre, terrifying, and deeply mysterious story of the toxic lady. It was February 19th, 1994. The city of Riverside, California, was completely still. The sky was a vast, cloudless black, and the streets were mostly empty. Inside the emergency room at Riverside General Hospital, the night shift had settled into its familiar, quiet hum. Nurses moved calmly between the stark white corridors. The sharp scent of rubbing alcohol and bleached linens hung in the air. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with a low electric drone. It was exactly 8:15 p.m. Everything was ordinary. Everything was controlled. Then the ambulance doors slid open. Paramedics rushed a gurney through the entrance. Lying on the stretcher was 31-year-old Gloria Ramirez. She was a mother of two. A woman known to her neighbors as kind and deeply devoted to her family. But on this night, Gloria was in the late stages of advanced cervical cancer. She was suffering from massive cardiac complications. She was struggling to breathe, taking fast, shallow gasps of air. Her heart was beating at a rapid, terrifying pace, and her blood pressure was plummeting. The medical staff, a highly trained, deeply experienced trauma team, sprang into action. They moved her to Trauma Room 1, the brightest, most sterile corner of the emergency department. They had seen this 1,000 times before. A patient in distress. A protocol to follow. They attached her to the monitors. The slow, rhythmic beeping of the machines echoed off the cold tile walls. They administered oxygen. They injected fast-acting sedatives. They used a defibrillator to try and shock her racing heart back into a steady, survivable rhythm. But Gloria's body was not responding. And then, the atmosphere in Trauma Room 1 began to change. The first thing they noticed was the sheen. As the nurses worked over Gloria, undressing her to attach the defibrillator pads, they noticed an oily, greasy film covering her chest and stomach. It was thick, unnatural, and reflected the harsh overhead light. Some thought it might be a lotion or an ointment applied at home. But there was no time to ask. Registered nurse Susan Kane stepped forward to draw blood from Gloria's right arm. She needed to run a blood gas analysis to see exactly what was failing inside the patient's body. Susan expertly found a vein, inserted the needle, and watched the dark crimson liquid flow into the plastic syringe. But as Susan held the syringe up to the light, she paused. A strange smell was drifting out of the plastic tube. It was sharp, chemical. Some described it as the heavy scent of ammonia. Others said it smelled distinctly like garlic. It was pungent, cutting right through the sterile smell of the hospital air. Susan handed the syringe to Julie Gorczynski, a brilliant medical resident standing nearby. Julie held the vial up to the harsh fluorescent light. She squinted. The air suspended inside the dark red blood were tiny, manila-colored particles. They looked like microscopic grains of sand, or tiny crystallized snowflakes floating in the plasma. Human blood does not crystallize while still warm. Julie leaned in closer, trying to comprehend what she was looking at. Maureen Welch, a respiratory therapist who was pumping oxygen into Gloria's lungs, leaned in as well. She caught a whiff of the garlic-like odor. And then, the dominoes began to fall. Nurse Susan Kane, who had drawn the blood, suddenly stumbled backward. She swayed on her feet. Her face went pale. The world around her began to tilt. A burning sensation crawled up her face. Before anyone could catch her, Susan's eyes rolled back, and she collapsed violently onto the hard linoleum floor. She had fainted. They dragged Susan out of Trauma Room 1 and into the hallway. Julie Gorczynski, the resident who was holding the strange, crystallized blood, watched her colleague fall. But before Julie could process what had happened, a wave of profound nausea washed over her. Julie felt dizzy. The harsh lights above her began to spin. She left Trauma Room 1, seeking fresh air. She walked toward the nurse's station, leaned heavily against the desk, and tried to focus her eyes. But a sudden, terrifying paralysis gripped her body. Her knees buckled. Julie Gorczynski collapsed. Within minutes, she began convulsing. Her breathing grew shallow. When the other nurses rushed to her side, they found that Julie was struggling to breathe, and horrifyingly, the bones in her knees had begun to suffer a strange, spontaneous cellular death, a condition known as a vascular necrosis. Back in Trauma Room 1, Maureen Welch, the respiratory therapist, watched her two colleagues drop. The chemical smell of garlic and ammonia was still heavy in the air. Maureen stepped back from the bed. She felt her muscles weaken. Her limbs felt like they were made of lead. The room darkened around the edges of her vision. Maureen collapsed, hitting the floor. 3 medical professionals, highly trained, surrounded by life-saving equipment, all felled within minutes of standing near a single patient. Panic, quiet and cold, swept through the emergency room. The attending physician, Dr. Humberto Ochoa, realized something catastrophic was happening. An invisible contagion, a toxic gas, a chemical weapon. Something was radiating from Gloria Ramirez. He gave the order. Evacuate. Imagine the scene. It is past 9 o'clock at night. The cold February air bites at the skin. Nurses and doctors scramble to push patients out of the hospital doors. Gurneys are rolled into the dimly lit parking lot. IV bags swing wildly from their metal stands. Men, women, and children sit in the dark, wrapped in thin hospital blankets, illuminated only by the flashing red and blue lights of arriving police cruisers and fire engines. Inside the hospital, a skeleton crew remained in Trauma Room 1, wearing whatever protective gear they could find, fighting to save Gloria Ramirez. But at 8:50 p.m., despite their frantic, terrifying efforts, Gloria's heart stopped for the final time. She was pronounced dead. By the end of the night, 23 medical staff members became ill. 5 were hospitalized. Julie Gorczynski spent 2 weeks in the intensive care unit, fighting for her life, her body mysteriously damaged by an invisible force. When the hazardous materials team arrived, wearing thick, heavy, airtight suits and carrying advanced chemical sensors, they swept the entire emergency room. They tested the air. They tested the vents. They tested the drains. They found nothing. No toxic gas. No chemical spills. No radiation. The hospital was entirely clean. The body of Gloria Ramirez was sealed in a specialized airtight aluminum casket. Her autopsy was conducted by pathologists wearing moon suits, breathing through external oxygen lines in a custom-built, pressurized room. They searched her organs. They analyzed her tissue. They tested the strange crystallized blood. Months passed. The public demanded answers. How could a dying woman paralyze an entire trauma team? Initially, the state health department ruled the entire event an episode of mass hysteria, a psychological domino effect triggered by the stress of a failing patient and a strange smell. But the victims, the doctors and nurses who had suffered organ damage and bone death, refused to accept this. Mass hysteria does not cause your bones to die. It wasn't until scientists at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory got involved that a terrifying, brilliant scientific theory emerged. Gloria Ramirez was in severe pain from her cancer. It is believed that to soothe her aching body, she had been rubbing a common over-the-counter solvent onto her skin, a substance called DMSO, dimethyl sulfoxide. DMSO has a distinct garlic-like odor. It explains the greasy, oily sheen the nurses found on her chest. When the paramedics gave Gloria oxygen in the ambulance, the highly concentrated oxygen molecules bound to the DMSO on her skin, creating a new compound, DMSO2. DMSO2 is known to crystallize at room temperature. This explains the tiny, manila-colored snowflakes floating in the syringe. But it was the final step of this chemical chain reaction that turned a medical tragedy into a localized horror story. When the medical team used the defibrillator, the electric shocks sent thousands of volts of electricity through Gloria's chest. The scientists theorized that this raw electric energy forced the DMSO2 molecules to bind with even more oxygen, creating a final, deadly chemical shift. It created DMSO4, dimethyl sulfate. Dimethyl sulfate is a horrific, highly toxic chemical gas. It was used as a chemical weapon in warfare. It causes temporary paralysis, severe tissue damage, convulsions, and cellular death. In a bizarre, 1 in a billion sequence of events, a simple pain relief cream, combined with oxygen masks, plastic syringes, and electric shocks, had accidentally turned a dying woman's body into a microscopic chemical weapons factory. To this day, the Livermore theory remains just that, a theory. A scientific hypothesis attempting to put a rational frame around a nightmare. Gloria's family never fully accepted the findings. The hospital eventually reopened its doors. The sterile white hallways were cleaned. The linoleum floors were polished. And the night shift returned to its quiet, predictable hum. But the case of the toxic lady remains one of the most bizarre, terrifying anomalies in medical history. A stark reminder that no matter how much we understand about the human body, it still holds the power to surprise us, to break the rules, to create mysteries that linger long after the lights are turned off. As the rain continues to fall outside your window, let the details of Trauma Room 1 fade away. Let the tension leave your shoulders. Let your breathing slow down, matching the steady rhythm of the storm. The mystery belongs to the past. You are safe in the present. Thank you for listening to True Radar. Close your eyes, rest well, and sweet dreams.